The Buddha once said that everything he taught could be summed up in one line: nothing whatsoever should be clung to. At first, this sounds like being told to give up everything that matters to you. But the people who actually tried it found something surprising. When they loosened their grip, even a little, what showed up was not loss. It was relief, a feeling of things being okay, just as they are. The world did not go anywhere. It was still right here. They just stopped fighting with it. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. There is an idea at the heart of Buddhist teaching that most people get backwards. We think peace is something we have to go out and get, something we earn or find or build. But the Buddha taught the opposite. Tonight, we will spend some time with the idea that peace is what is already here when we stop disturbing it. We will look at it through stories, through the teachings of the Buddha and the Zen masters, and through the ordinary moments of daily life where it becomes most clear. No knowledge of Buddhism is needed to listen. Just relax, settle in, and take a slow, deep breath. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. The Buddha lived about 2,500 years ago in northern India. He spent 6 years trying every spiritual method available, from extreme fasting to intense meditation. When he finally found what he was looking for, he did not dress it up. He did not make it sound grand. His teaching was practical. One of his students compared it to being handed a plate of plain food. Here are your carrots. Here are your potatoes. Get on with it. No fancy sauce. No spectacle. Most of us assume that real peace must come from something dramatic. A breakthrough. A life-changing moment on a mountaintop. We look at people who seem genuinely at ease and we think they must know something we do not, or have done something we have not done yet. The Buddha's teaching goes in the other direction. It is plain, specific, and unglamorous. Here is the problem. Here is how it works. Here is what you can do about it. The interesting thing about this kind of teaching is that it works through experience, not through understanding alone. You can read about swimming all you like, study the diagrams, admire the technique, but at some point you get in the water, and the water holds you, and then you know what swimming is. The Buddha's teaching is like that. It is less about grasping the theory and more about noticing what is already happening in your own life. And when you start to notice, something unexpected shows up. The ease you were looking for turns out to have been here the whole time, hidden inside the smallest moments of release. You do not build the ease. You uncover it. Think of a time when you were stuck on an irritating thought. Someone said something rude to you earlier in the day, and you have been replaying it for hours, sharpening your comeback, rehearsing the argument, running the scene again and again. And then, at some point, you just stop. You do not force the thought out. You do not win some inner battle. You just notice you have been chewing on this thing, and you let it go. You move on. If you pay close attention to that moment, there is something there that is easy to miss. Right after you let the thought go, there is a brief feeling of relief. Your shoulders drop a little. Your breathing loosens. There is a sense of space that was not there a second ago, like walking out of a stuffy room into fresh air. It does not last long. A few seconds, maybe. But it is real, and it feels good. The Buddha had a word for this. He called it the deathless. That sounds like a big, mystical concept, but he meant something very specific. He was not talking about life after death or some faraway spiritual realm. He was talking about what you feel when grasping stops, even for a moment. When you stop holding on so tight, what shows up is not nothing. It is the feeling of being alive without the weight. And it is available right now, in any ordinary moment, whenever you let something go. There is a story from the ancient Buddhist scriptures about a young sage who lived in a small town by a river. He was known for being unusually clear-headed, and people in the town would bring their disputes to him when they could not sort things out themselves. One afternoon, 2 women showed up at his door. They were arguing loudly. Each one claimed to be the mother of the same baby boy. They were both pulling the child toward themselves, and the boy was crying. The sage listened to both of them. Then he had a line drawn in the dirt in front of his house. He placed the child in the middle and told each woman to take hold of him, one by his arms, the other by his legs. "Pull him across the line," he said. "Whoever gets the child to her side can keep him." The first woman pulled hard. But the second woman, the moment she saw the child's face crumple in pain, let go. She stepped back. She could not do it. The sage turned to the crowd that had gathered. "Whose heart is tender toward a child?" he asked. "The one who holds on, or the one who lets go?" The answer was obvious to everyone. He gave the boy back to the woman who had released him. The real mother's love was invisible while she was gripping. The moment she opened her hands, everyone could see the truth. Grasping hid it. Letting go revealed it. The Buddha saw this same pattern running through all of human experience. We grip our opinions, our plans, our ideas about how things should go, and the tighter we hold, the less clearly we see. We think that holding on is what keeps us safe, but often it is the holding itself that keeps us stuck. The truth about a situation, about a person, about ourselves, tends to come into view only when we ease up. This does not just apply to big dramatic moments like the one in that story. It applies just as much to the small, ordinary frustrations that fill a regular day. A cup of tea can teach you this, if you let it. A monk lived in a monastery up in the hills. He had been practicing for years. He knew the teachings well, but they still felt like information rather than experience, like reading a menu instead of eating the food. One morning, someone brought him a cup of tea. He took the cup, raised it to his lips, and noticed there was no sugar. He liked sugar in his tea. He always had sugar in his tea. And just like that, a small irritation went through him. It was nothing dramatic, just a little pang of wanting what was not there. A tightness in the chest, the urge to say something, or get up and go find the sugar bowl. But instead of acting on it, he stayed where he was. He held the cup. He breathed. He felt the irritation fully, without doing anything about it. It was uncomfortable for a few seconds, like a small wave hitting him and then passing through. And when it passed, something opened up. He was still holding the same cup. The tea was still plain. Nothing had changed. But he felt, suddenly, that he did not need the missing thing. He was fine without it. More than fine. He felt complete. There is something on the other side of wanting. The monk felt the pull. He stayed with it, instead of chasing it, and it passed through him. What was left was a feeling of being okay that had been there the whole time. He just could not feel it while he was reaching for the sugar. This is what the Buddha meant when he talked about the end of suffering. He was not describing some superhuman state. He was describing what ordinary people feel in ordinary moments when the grasping lets up. The monk did not become enlightened over a cup of tea, but he tasted something real. And that taste is available to anyone, in any situation where you are willing to stay with what is here instead of chasing what is missing. When the Buddha first decided to share what he had learned, he walked to a deer park on the outskirts of a small town in northern India. It was a quiet, protected place where deer roamed freely because hunting was not allowed there. He went at dusk. 5 men were waiting, though waiting is not quite the right word. These were monks who had practiced alongside the Buddha for years, sharing his harsh disciplines, his long fasts, his punishing routines. When he gave up that extreme path, they lost respect for him. They thought he had gone soft. They had agreed among themselves to give him the cold shoulder when he showed up. But when he arrived, something was different about him. They could feel it. There was a calmness in him that had not been there before, a kind of steadiness that you could sense just by being near him. He did not look like a man who had given up. He looked like a man who had found what he was looking for. Their plan to ignore him fell apart. They offered him a seat. They listened. He spoke simply. "The deathless has been found," he told them. "Open your hearts. Trust this. You can know it for yourselves." Then he gave them a straightforward teaching. 4 observations, known as the 4 Noble Truths. The first, life involves suffering. Not as a punishment, but as a fact. We get sick, we lose people we love, things do not go the way we want. The second, this suffering has a cause, and the cause is craving, the constant reaching for things to be other than they are. The third, it is possible for that craving to end. And the fourth, there is a clear, practical path to ending it, step by step. That was it. No fireworks. No grand performance. Just a man who had figured something out, sitting under the trees at dusk, talking to 5 skeptical monks who were slowly realizing he might be telling the truth. And yet everything in the Buddhist tradition, all 2,500 years of it, grew from that one plain evening. The whole thing traces back to a single, simple idea. Suffering comes from holding on too tight, and it eases when you let go. In ancient China, during the Tang dynasty, over 1,000 years ago, a wandering monk walked the roads between villages. He carried a big cloth sack everywhere he went. Inside it, he kept small gifts, candy for children, fruit for anyone who was hungry, little trinkets for people who had nothing. He walked from village to village giving things away. He was a big man with a round belly and he smiled constantly. He laughed at almost everything. One day, a serious, scholarly monk stopped him on the road. "Tell me," the scholar said, "what is the whole point of practice? What does it all come down to?" The wandering monk did not say a word. He just lowered the sack off his shoulder and set it on the ground. He stood there without it and smiled. The scholar thought about this, then asked, "All right. But what happens after that? What comes next?" The wandering monk picked the sack back up, swung it over his shoulder, and kept walking. 2 gestures, and between them, the whole teaching. The first one, putting the sack down, is what it feels like to let go. All the things you are carrying, the worries, the grudges, the plans that keep you up at night, you set them down. Just for a moment. And in that moment you feel what it is like to be free of the weight. The second gesture is just as important. He picks the sack back up. He goes back to his life. He keeps walking, keeps giving, keeps doing his ordinary work. Letting go does not mean quitting your life. It means you stop being crushed by it. You carry the same stuff, but it does not own you anymore. You carry it by choice, and that changes everything. After his awakening, the Buddha spent about 7 weeks just enjoying what he had found. The old texts describe him walking slowly, sitting by the river, standing under the trees for long stretches. He was not in a rush to go anywhere or do anything. He was just being where he was, and it was enough. 7 weeks. The man who would go on to become one of the most important teachers in history spent the first 7 weeks after his breakthrough doing basically nothing. Just sitting around. Just being. And he was deeply, thoroughly at peace. Not because he had gained something new, but because the endless wanting had finally quieted down. For the first time, he was not trying to get anywhere or become anything. He was just here. And here turned out to be enough. This tells us something important about what peace actually is. We tend to think of it as something you have to build, earn, work toward. But the Buddha's experience was different. The peace was already there. It had always been there. It was just covered up by all the reaching and grasping and worrying and planning. When that stopped, the peace was what was left. Like a pond that someone has been stirring with a stick for years. The water was clear the whole time. You just had to stop stirring and let the mud settle. You do not need to change your life tonight. You do not need to shave your head or move to a monastery. You just need to start noticing the moments of letting go that already happen in your day and start paying attention to how they feel. The next time you catch yourself grinding on a thought, spinning it around, chewing on it, try letting it rest. You do not need to fight it. Just notice the grip, ease up a little, and see what happens in the space that opens. It might be small, a half second where your chest loosens, a breath that comes a little easier. That is enough. That is the taste of what the Buddha was talking about. He put it this way: in the one who clings, there is agitation. In the one who does not cling, there is stillness. That is the whole teaching in one line. Agitation and stillness are not two different places. They are two different ways of holding the same moment. One is a clenched fist. The other is an open hand. And you do not have to open the fist all at once. You can start small. One thought you decide not to chase. One irritation you let pass through you instead of feeding it. One cup of tea taken just as it is. Each time you do this, it leaves a mark. Each small act of letting go trains you in the direction of ease. Over time, the habit of holding on starts to loosen, and the habit of being okay starts to grow. The whole path is made of these small steps. Let us rest here for a breath or two. Notice how you are feeling, and when you are ready, we will continue together. The Buddha talked a lot about birth and death. Most people assume he was talking about the big events, the day you are born and the day you die. But his teachings suggest something more immediate than that. Something that happens to you dozens of times a day, every day, without you even noticing. Consider an ordinary morning. You wake up with a plan. Today will be productive. Today will be good. You have an idea of how it will go, and for a few minutes, that idea holds together. You are born into this version of the day. You are the person with the plan, the person who has it together, and the world is organized around that feeling. Then something interrupts. An email you did not want to see. A headache. A conversation that goes sideways. The version of the day you were living in collapses. That little world you built in your mind falls apart. You feel frustrated, deflated, annoyed. This is what the Buddha called death. The collapse of a world you were holding together. But it does not end there. Almost immediately, you start building a new one. Maybe this time the plan is smaller, just get through the afternoon. Or maybe it swings the other direction. Forget it, the day is ruined, nothing works. I am the person to whom bad things happen. Either way, you are born again into a new little world, a new identity, a new story about how things are going. And then that one collapses too. And you build another. And on it goes. All day long. Birth, death, birth, death. Birth, birth, birth. Building up, falling apart, building up again. When you die out of happiness, the Buddha said, you get reborn in unhappiness. And when the unhappiness gets bad enough, something shifts and you get reborn into hope. And then the hope collapses and around you go again. The Buddha said this is the real cycle of suffering. It is not something that happens over lifetimes. It happens between breakfast and lunch. The Buddhist scriptures tell of a king in the ancient world whose goodness was so great that he was given dominion over the entire earth. Every kingdom bowed to him. Every treasure was his. He ruled from the finest palace ever built, surrounded by every comfort a person could imagine. Servants brought him whatever he desired. Musicians played through the long afternoons. The gardens were perfect. The food was perfect. Everything was exactly as he wished. But after some time, the king grew restless. He would sit in his perfect garden and feel a familiar itch, a sense that something was missing, that there must be more. The earth was not enough. He looked upward and asked his ministers, "What is above this?" They told him, there were higher realms, heavenly kingdoms, where beings lived in even greater splendor. So the king, through the power of his merit, ascended to the lowest of the heavenly realms. The beings there welcomed him and gave him rule over their kingdom too. For a while, he was satisfied. The heavenly realm was more beautiful than anything on earth. The light was different there, softer, and the music was not made by instruments, but seemed to come from the air itself. He was happy. And then, slowly, the old feeling crept back. The itch, the restlessness. "What is above this?" he asked again. He rose to a higher heaven, then a higher one still. Each time, the same thing happened. He arrived, he enjoyed, the enjoyment faded, and the wanting returned. At last he reached the highest heaven and was given half of its kingdom. For ages he ruled there, longer than any human lifespan, longer than entire civilizations on earth. 36 rulers of that heaven came and went during his stay. He outlasted them all. And still, sitting in the highest heaven, with half the kingdom, He found himself thinking, why should I settle for half? He wanted the rest. He wanted it all. And the moment that thought took hold, something shifted. The power that had carried him upward all this time began to fade. His body grew heavy. The heaven that had welcomed him started to feel distant, as though he no longer belonged there. Slowly, like a leaf losing the wind that held it aloft, he sank back down through the realms he had conquered, one by one, until he found himself on the ground again, an old man, with nothing left but the understanding that no amount of having had ever been enough. This story is not really about a king or about heavenly realms. It is about the mechanism of wanting itself. The Buddha's point was that desire does not have a finish line. You can give it everything it asks for, every single thing, and it will still ask for more. It is not that the things you want are bad. It is that wanting, by its nature, does not end. It just moves to the next thing. And this is what drives the cycle of birth and death in daily life. You want something, you get it, you enjoy it for a while, the enjoyment fades, and you start wanting the next thing. You are born into the having, and then you die out of it, and then you are born into the wanting again. Over and over. Most of us know this feeling. You look forward to a vacation for months. You get there. It is lovely. And within a day or two, part of your mind is already thinking about what comes after, or worrying about the trip home, or comparing this trip to the last one. The having never quite matches the wanting. The Buddha was not saying this to be grim. He was saying it because recognizing the pattern is the first step toward getting free of it. There is another way to look at this, and it has to do with how we build our sense of who we are. Every time something pleasant happens, we grab hold of it and make it part of our identity. We become the person who is having a good day. We build a little world around that feeling and try to protect it. Then something unpleasant happens, and that world gets punctured. It is like a balloon being pricked. You pump it up, someone pokes it, and it collapses. So you start pumping up a new one. You can watch this happening on an ordinary day if you slow down enough to notice. You get some good news in the morning, and you walk a little taller. You are the person things are working out for. Then someone criticizes you at work, and the whole thing deflates. Now you are the person who can never get it right. Then your friend calls and says something kind and you inflate again. Then you hit traffic on the way home and you are back to feeling like life is against you. Each of these is a small birth and a small death. Each one feels real while it is happening. Each one feels like it is telling you something permanent about who you are and how your life is going. But none of them last. They are all temporary worlds, built fast and dissolved fast, and the building and dissolving is itself what keeps you tired. Over time, this gets exhausting. If you have lived long enough, you probably know the feeling of just being worn down by the whole process. Tired of getting your hopes up, tired of being disappointed, tired of starting over. There is a low-level weariness that settles in, a sense of, well, this is just how it is. Nothing is going to fully work out. Better to keep my expectations small. The Buddha recognized this state too. He did not judge it. He said it was a natural result of going through the cycle enough times. You start to pull back from life, protect yourself, keep things small and manageable. You stop expecting much. But he also said this was not the only option. There is a difference between being disillusioned and being free. Disillusionment says, nothing works, so why bother? Freedom says, I see the pattern now, and I do not have to be driven by it anymore. There is a story about a stonecutter who worked in a quarry, breaking rock in the heat. One day he passed the house of a wealthy merchant and saw the fine furniture through the window, the silk curtains, the servants coming and going. He wished with all his heart to be that merchant. And in this story, as stories go, his wish was granted. He became the merchant. He sat in the cool house and ate fine food and gave orders to his servants. He was happy for a while. Then the summer came, and the sun blazed so fiercely that even his silk curtains could not keep out the heat. He looked up at the sun and thought, the sun is more powerful than I am. He wished to be the sun. He became the sun. He blazed across the sky, scorching the fields. Then a cloud drifted in front of him and blocked his light completely. The cloud is more powerful, he thought, and wished to be the cloud. He became the cloud. He poured rain across the land. But the rain ran off a great stone cliff, and the cliff did not move at all. The stone is more powerful, he thought. He became the stone. Huge, immovable, untouched by sun or rain. Then he felt a sharp tap at his base. And another. And another. He looked down and saw a stonecutter with a chisel chipping away at him, piece by piece. The stonecutter ends up right back where he started. He went through every form of power he could imagine, and each one turned out to have something above it, something that could undo it. The cycle brought him full circle. This connects to what the Buddha called becoming. We become something, and then we discover its limits, and then we want to become something else. The merchant becomes the sun becomes the cloud. In daily life it looks different, but the engine is the same. We become the person with the plan, then the person whose plan failed, then the person trying a new plan. We become the successful one, then the struggling one, then the hopeful one, then the disappointed one again. Each becoming feels like progress. Each new identity feels like it might be the right one, the stable one, the one that will finally hold. But none of them hold for long, because they are all built on the same shaky foundation, the belief that if you could just become the right thing, you would be okay. The way out is not to become something better. It is to start noticing the becoming itself. To catch the moment when you are about to build a new identity out of whatever just happened to you, and instead of building, just stay with what is here. The plan fell apart. Okay. You do not have to immediately become the person whose plan fell apart. You can just be here with the fact of what happened without wrapping a whole story around it. The Buddha called this the middle way. Not swinging between highs and lows, not chasing the next version of yourself, but finding the steady ground that is already underneath all the swinging. The ground does not move. The swinging is what moves. And the swinging is optional once you see it for what it is. In the Dhammapada, one of the oldest collections of the Buddha's sayings, there is a verse that goes, I have gone through many rounds of birth and death, looking in vain for the builder of this house. Again and again I was born. Again and again I suffered. But now, house builder, you are seen. You shall build no house again. The house is the identity we keep constructing. The house builder is the habit of becoming, the automatic impulse to turn every experience into a story about who we are. The Buddha saw it clearly, and once he saw it, It lost its power over him. The house builder was seen, and that was enough. He did not destroy anything. He did not fight anything. He just saw the process for what it was, a habit of building little worlds out of every pleasant and unpleasant thing that happened, and then suffering when those worlds inevitably fell apart. We do not need to stop the process all at once. We just need to start seeing it. The next time you feel the day falling apart, the next time a plan collapses and frustration rises, see if you can catch the moment before you build the next story. Just for a second, stay in the gap. The old world has ended. The new one has not started yet. In that gap, there is something quiet and open. It does not last long, but it is real, and it is restful, and it is what the Buddha was pointing toward every time he talked about the end of becoming. You do not have to become anything right now. You do not have to be the person who is doing well or the person who is struggling. You do not have to be any kind of person at all. You can just be here, without a label, without a plan, just breathing, just present. And in that simplicity, the cycle pauses. The house builder rests. And for a moment, there is peace without anyone needing to build it. Take a slow breath now and let it leave on its own. Then we will go on. There is a particular kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with how much sleep you got. It is the tiredness of not being fully here. You sit at dinner and your mind is already on tomorrow. You talk to someone and you are not really listening. You are waiting for your turn. You move through a crowd and barely register that another human being was there. Present in body, somewhere else in mind. The Buddha had a strong word for this. He called it death. He said that wanting to not be here continuously is what it means to be dead while still alive. He was not talking about the body. He was talking about a way of living in which you are always somewhere other than where you actually are. Always leaning toward the next thing, or the better thing, or the thing you wish were happening instead of what is actually happening right now. There is an old story, told across many traditions in India, about a deer that lived in a great forest at the foot of the mountains. This deer carried a gland near his belly that produced a beautiful scent, the scent of musk, which drifted through the trees wherever he went. One morning, the deer caught a trace of something extraordinary on the breeze. A fragrance so lovely it stopped him in his tracks. He had never smelled anything like it. He had to find it. He searched the meadow where he had been grazing. He crossed the stream and searched the far bank. He climbed the ridge and searched the valley beyond. The scent was everywhere and nowhere. Every time he thought he was getting closer, it seemed to shift. It was always just ahead, just out of reach, somewhere in the next clearing, behind the next stand of trees. Days passed. He searched the whole forest, from the riverbank to the high passes. He barely ate. He barely slept. The fragrance haunted him. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever encountered, and he could not find its source. After a long time, the deer was exhausted. He had covered every stretch of ground he knew and found nothing. He lay down at last beneath a tree, breathing hard, ready to give up. An old friend, a doe, who had watched all this from a distance, came and sat beside him. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "A fragrance," said the deer. the most beautiful scent I have ever known. I have searched everywhere for it." The friend looked at him gently. "The scent is coming from you," she said. "It has been coming from you the whole time." The deer spent his life chasing something he already carried. He searched the entire forest for a fragrance that was rising from his own body. The search was sincere. The exhaustion was real. But the solution was never out there in the next valley. It was right here, so close that the deer could not see it. The Buddha taught something very similar. He said that the peace we long for, the connection we crave, the aliveness we keep searching for in new places and new people and new experiences is not located somewhere outside of us. It is here. It has always been here. But we cannot feel it because we are too busy looking for it somewhere else. This is one of the simplest ideas in all of Buddhism, and also one of the hardest to accept, because the feeling of separation is so convincing. It really does feel like something is missing. It really does feel like the answer is out there somewhere, in a different city, a different job, a different relationship. The Buddha was not saying those feelings are not real. He was saying that if you follow them all the way to their source, you find that they begin and end in your own mind. The longing is real, but the thing you are longing for is not where you think it is. This is the real cost of wanting to be elsewhere. It is not just that we miss the present moment. It is that the very thing we are searching for is in the present moment, and by leaving it, we keep ourselves from finding it. The Lotus Sutra, one of the great Buddhist scriptures, tells of two friends who had known each other since childhood. One was wealthy, a merchant who had done well in trade. The other was poor and had spent most of his life struggling to get by, moving from place to place, working whatever jobs he could find, never quite able to get a foothold. One evening, after years apart, the poor man visited his wealthy friend. They sat together in the wealthy man's house. They ate together, they drank wine, they talked for hours about old times. The poor man, tired from his long travels, grew drowsy and eventually fell asleep right there on the floor. The wealthy friend had to leave early the next morning on urgent business. Before he left, he wanted to give his friend something that would change his life. But his friend was deep asleep, and nothing could wake him. So the wealthy man took a jewel, a gem of extraordinary value, and sewed it carefully into the lining of his friend's worn-out coat. Then he left. The poor man woke up alone. He had no idea what his friend had done. He put on his coat and went back to his life of wandering. For years he traveled from town to town, working hard, barely getting by. He slept in barns and under trees. He begged when he had to. He always felt that something was missing, that there must be something better waiting for him just down the road. Years later, the two friends met again, by chance, on a trade route. The wealthy man was shocked to see that his friend was still poor, still struggling, still wearing the same ragged coat. "What happened?" he said. "Did you not find the jewel?" "What jewel?" "The one I sewed into your coat. It has been with you this entire time. You have been carrying it through every hardship, every hungry night, every mile of road." The poor man reached into the lining of his coat, and there it was. The jewel that could have changed everything. He had been carrying it for years and never knew. The teaching in this story is direct. We spend our lives convinced that what we need is somewhere out there, somewhere we have not been yet. with someone we have not met yet. Meanwhile, what we actually need has been with us the whole time, stitched into the fabric of our own experience, so close we never thought to look. The Buddha said that the divisions we feel, the sense that real life is happening somewhere else, that the answer is out there if we could just get to it, these divisions are not built into reality. We build them. We split the world into here and there, into what we have and what we need, and then we exhaust ourselves trying to cross the gap. But the gap is something we made. It is not actually there. This is a hard thing to accept, because the feeling of separation is so convincing. It really does feel like what you need is somewhere else. It really does feel like other people have something you do not. The Buddha was not saying those feelings are wrong or that you should ignore them. He was saying that if you trace them back to their source, what you find is that they begin and end in your own mind. The longing is real. The location of what you are longing for is not where you think it is. There is a quieter side to this teaching that runs deep. When the Buddha talked about the parts of ourselves we push away, he was very practical about it. He said that most of us have areas of our inner life that we do not want to look at. Feelings we have decided are not acceptable. Memories that are uncomfortable. Parts of our character that do not fit the story we tell about ourselves. Sadness we have not allowed ourselves to feel. Longings we have not admitted. These parts do not go away when we ignore them. They just go underground. And from underground, they do two things. They drain energy, because it takes real effort to keep them hidden, even when the effort is unconscious. And they create longing, because the parts of ourselves we have exiled often show up disguised as things we think we need from the outside world. The intimacy we crave from another person may be the intimacy we have denied ourselves. The aliveness we look for in travel or new experiences may be the aliveness we have suppressed right where we are. The peace we imagine finding in some future version of our life may be the peace that is already available in this one, if only we stopped running from certain parts of it. The Buddha's invitation was simple. Instead of reaching outward for what feels missing, try turning inward. Not to analyze or fix, just to notice what is there. To stop treating certain parts of your experience as the enemy and start letting them be part of the whole picture. To be a little more honest about what you actually feel, moment to moment, even when what you feel is uncomfortable or does not match the image you have of yourself. This is not easy work, but it is the kind of work that actually resolves the longing, because it addresses the longing at its source rather than chasing it across one more valley. There is a phrase that shows up again and again in Zen teaching. What you are looking for is where you are looking from. It sounds like a riddle, but it is about as practical as a teaching gets. It means that the awareness you are using right now, the simple fact of being conscious and present in this moment, is itself the thing you have been searching for. You do not need to find it. You are already using it. You just have not noticed, because you were looking in the wrong direction. The Buddha put it differently but meant the same thing. He said that what we are trying to commune with, the thing we think is out there, is really here. It is not a distant goal. It is the ground you are standing on. The sense of aliveness you are looking for is not in the next city or the next relationship. It is in the act of looking itself. It is the awareness that is aware right now. This is what makes the path so strange and so kind at the same time. There is nothing you need to go out and get. There is nothing missing. There is only the habit of looking away from what is already present. And that habit, like all habits, can be gently unlearned, not through force, not through trying harder, but through the simple act of pausing and noticing what is already here. You are here right now, listening to these words. You are breathing. You are aware of the room around you, or the bed beneath you, or the night outside. All of that is happening without any effort on your part. The awareness that holds all of this is not something you had to earn or build. It was here before you started listening, and it will be here after you stop. It is the jewel in the coat. It is the fragrance the deer already carries. It is the home you never actually left, no matter how far you traveled. The search can stop whenever you are ready to let it. There is no hurry. Breathe once, gently, and we will walk on together. There is an assumption most of us live with that we rarely question. We assume that there is a world out there, solid and fixed, and that we are in here, looking at it. The world is the stage. We are the audience. Things happen to us. We react. The Buddha looked at this very carefully and came to a different conclusion. He said that the world we experience is not something that exists independently and then enters our awareness. It is something our awareness builds, moment by moment, out of 5 simple processes. He called these the 5 aggregates, and they are form, feeling, perception, mental activity, and consciousness. That might sound abstract, so here is what it actually looks like. Right now, as you listen, your senses are picking up information. The sound of this voice, the feel of whatever you are lying or sitting on, the temperature of the air, maybe a distant sound from outside. That is form, the raw material of experience. As each bit of information arrives, something in you immediately files it, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. That is feeling. It happens instantly, before you have time to think about it. The pillow is soft, pleasant. There is a noise outside, unpleasant. The wall is there, neutral. This sorting never stops. It is running in the background all the time, tagging everything that comes through your senses. Then comes perception. This is where the raw information gets labeled. That sound is a car. That shape is a window. That feeling in my back is tension. Perception turns the blur of experience into recognizable objects and events. It is the part of your mind that says, I know what that is. After perception comes mental activity. This is where things get really busy. Plans form. Opinions arise. You like this, you want more of that, you want to avoid the other thing. Little programs start running. Should I adjust the pillow? Should I check my phone? What time is it? I need to call someone tomorrow. What am I doing this weekend? All of this is happening in the background, constantly, even when you think you are doing nothing. Just sitting in a quiet room, the mind is working hard. Plans, memories, judgments, impulses, tiny strategies for getting comfortable, tiny worries about the future, all of it churning away. And all of it is held within consciousness, the knowing quality that makes any experience possible in the first place. Consciousness is the space in which all the other 4 processes happen. Without it, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no mental activity. It is the most basic fact of your experience. that you are aware. The Buddha's teaching here is not that these 5 processes are bad or that we should try to stop them. The teaching is that what we call the world is actually the output of these 5 processes. We think we are seeing the world as it is, but what we are really seeing is the world as we are building it, moment by moment, out of contact and feeling and habit. Here is a simple way to test this. Sit in a room and pay attention to what your eyes do. You do not see the whole room at once. Your eyes dart from point to point, picking out details. The edge of a table, the color of a curtain, a stain on the ceiling. Each of these is a tiny act of attention, a choice about what to focus on. And each choice shapes the world you are living in. If you focus on the stain on the ceiling, your world in that moment is a room with a stain. If you focus on the light coming through the window, your world in that moment is a room full of light. The room did not change. Your attention did. The Buddha said that attention is not neutral. It is an activity. It shapes and constructs. When you pay attention to something, you are not passively receiving it. You are actively building it into your experience. And what you build, you then have to live in. In the Zen tradition, a farmer once owned an ox. The ox was his livelihood, his most valuable possession, the animal that pulled his plow and carried his goods to market. One morning, the farmer decided his ox was missing. He set off immediately to find it, searching the hills, the valleys, the neighboring farms. He asked everyone he met, "Have you seen my ox?" A brown ox, strong, with a white mark on its forehead. Nobody had seen it. He followed tracks that turned out to belong to other animals. He covered enormous distances, growing more and more anxious. He barely slept. He forgot to eat. His whole life had narrowed to a single desperate question: where is my ox? After a long and exhausting search, he stopped to rest on a road high in the hills. A traveler was passing in the opposite direction. "You look troubled," the traveler said. "What are you searching for?" "My ox," the farmer said. "I have lost my ox and I cannot find it anywhere." "I have been searching for days." The traveler looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at the farmer's legs, which were draped on either side of a broad, warm back. "Tell me something," she said. "What are you sitting on?" The farmer looked down. He was sitting on his ox. He had been riding it the entire time. The story works because it is absurd, but the absurdity is the point. We spend enormous energy searching for something that is already right here, so close that we cannot see it. In the Zen tradition, this is one of the oldest images for the spiritual search, riding the ox while looking for the ox. What is the ox? In the original teaching, the ox stands for your own awareness, the knowing quality that is present in every moment of your life. You do not need to go looking for it. You are already using it. It is what you are using right now to hear these words, to feel the bed beneath you, to notice whether you are comfortable or not. It is not exotic. It is not hidden. It is the most ordinary thing in the world, so ordinary that we look right past it, the way the farmer looked right past the animal he was sitting on. The Japanese Zen master Hakuin wrote, "Not knowing how near the truth is, people seek it far away. They are like someone standing in water and crying out in thirst." It is the same teaching as the farmer and the ox. What you are looking for is where you already are. The search itself is what obscures it. The Buddha's teaching about the 5 aggregates is pointing at the same thing. We think the world is out there and we are in here trying to figure it out. But when you actually look at what is happening, you find that there is no clear line between in here and out there. The world you experience is being assembled by your own senses, your own feelings, your own attention, right now, right here. You are not watching the show. You are building it as you go. This might sound like bad news, like being told that you are trapped inside your own head. But the Buddha taught it as the doorway to freedom. Here is why. If the world you struggle with is something that exists independently of you, something fixed and solid and out there, then you are stuck with it. You cannot change reality. All you can do is try to survive it. But if the world you struggle with is something you are actively constructing, moment by moment, through your habits of attention and reaction, then something shifts. You are not stuck. You have a role in this. The way you pay attention, the way you respond to what arises, the quality of your intention, these things shape the world you live in. Not in some vague, wishful thinking way. In a direct, immediate, practical way. The Buddha said, "With our thoughts, we make the world." He was not being poetic. He was being precise. The quality of your attention in this moment is literally shaping the experience you are having. If you bring agitation to this moment, you will experience an agitated world. If you bring steadiness, you will experience a steadier one. The raw material has not changed. Your contribution to it has. There is an old Zen saying, before practice, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. During practice, mountains are no longer mountains and rivers are no longer rivers. After practice, mountains are once again mountains and rivers are once again rivers. This is describing the same shift the Buddha was pointing at, in 3 stages. In ordinary life, we take the world at face value. Mountains are mountains. The table is a table. Things are solid, fixed, obvious. We do not question it. Then, when you start to look carefully at how experience actually works, everything gets strange for a while. You realize that what you took to be solid reality is actually a constantly shifting construction of your own senses and mind. The table is not just a table. It is a collection of colors and shapes and textures that your perception assembles into something called table. The mountain is not just a mountain. It is light hitting your eyes, your brain making sense of the signal, your memory telling you what mountains are. The solidity you took for granted starts to feel less solid. This can be disorienting. It can feel like the ground is shifting underneath you, but it does not last. Eventually, something settles. You come back to mountains and rivers, but you relate to them differently. You know they are being built by your awareness, and you also know they are real in their way. Both things are true at the same time. The world is constructed, and the world is here. You are the builder, and you are also just someone walking through the hills on a warm evening. This is what the Buddha meant when he talked about coming into right relationship with experience. You stop fighting with the world you have built, and you start participating in it with more care. Because you know that how you attend to things matters. Every moment of attention is a contribution. Every reaction shapes the next moment. You are not a passive observer. You are a participant, and your participation matters. The practical side of this teaching is simple. You do not need to understand the philosophy to benefit from it. You just need to start noticing how your attention works. Right now, as you lie here, notice what your mind is doing. It is probably moving from one thing to another, picking up sounds, following thoughts, drifting into plans, coming back to these words. Each of these movements is a small act of construction. Your mind touches something, forms an impression, has a reaction, and moves on. A small world is built around each impression, and then dissolved when the next one arrives. This is happening all the time. It is so constant and so familiar that we never notice it. But when you do notice it, something changes. You realize you have a role in what your experience feels like. You are not just receiving the world. You are participating in its construction. And participation means you have some choice about how you participate. You can let your attention rest on what is actually here. The weight of your body against whatever is holding you. The temperature of the air on your skin. The rhythm of your breathing, which has been going on this whole time without you having to manage it. When you bring your attention to these things, the world that arises is a quieter one. You did not change anything outside of yourself. You just changed where you put your attention. And the world followed. The Buddha spent his life teaching people how to do this with more and more skill. How to notice where attention goes. How to choose where it rests. How to let intention become gentle and steady instead of scattered and frantic. The 5 aggregates are not a problem to be solved. They are the material you work with. And the work is simply this, to bring a little more care to the way you build your world, one moment at a time. Right now, in this moment, you are building something. The quality of your attention, the way you are listening, the way your body is resting, all of this is creating the world you are living in right now. And if that world feels quiet, if it feels okay, that is not an accident. That is your attention, at rest, doing what it does when it is not being pulled in 12 directions at once. This is what the Buddha was pointing toward. This is the world that arises when you let it arise gently. Let these words settle like dust in still air. We continue in a moment. Most of us know the feeling of being carried along by something we did not choose. You wake up, and before you have made a single conscious decision, the day has already started happening to you. The phone is in your hand. The worries are running. The mental list is scrolling. You did not sit down and decide to think about all of this. It just started, the way it starts every morning, and now you are in it. You get out of bed and the routine takes over. Coffee, shower, breakfast, the same sequence in the same order, and somewhere in the middle of it you realize you have been awake for 40 minutes and you have not been present for any of it. Your body did the morning. Your mind was already at work, or back in yesterday, or somewhere in next week. In Buddhist teaching, this is called habit energy. It is the momentum of all your accumulated patterns, everything your mind has practiced doing over and over until it became automatic. And most of our inner life runs on it. We do not choose most of our thoughts. We do not choose most of our reactions. They arise out of habit, and we go along with them, often without even noticing that there was a moment when we could have done something different. A man was riding a horse down a country road. The horse is galloping hard, and the man looks like someone with urgent business, leaning forward, holding on. A woman standing by the side of the road calls out to him as he passes. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" The man looks back over his shoulder and shouts, "I do not know. Ask the horse." The story is short, but the picture it paints is one most of us recognize. We are on the horse. The horse is running, and we have gotten so used to the ride that we have forgotten we are not the ones steering. We think we are choosing our direction, but if we are honest, most of the time we are just going where the momentum takes us. The horse is our habits, our patterns, the well-worn grooves of how we react to things. Something pleasant happens, and we grab for it. Something unpleasant happens, and we push away from it. Something neutral happens, and we check out, go somewhere else in our minds, wait for something more interesting. These three movements, grabbing, pushing, and checking out, are running almost all the time, and they are so fast and so familiar that we rarely catch them in the act. They feel like the way things are, but they are not the way things are. They are the way we respond to the way things are, and there is a difference. The Buddha described this process very precisely. He said there are three activities that keep consciousness churning: contact, attention, and intention. They work together, moment to moment, below the level of ordinary awareness, and together they build the world we experience. Contact is the raw meeting between your senses and the world. Your ear meets a sound. Your eye meets a shape. Your mind meets a thought. This is happening constantly, whether you are paying attention or not. You cannot stop it, and you do not need to. It is just the fact of being alive, of being a body in a world full of things to sense. Attention is what happens next. Out of all the contacts available in this moment, your mind zeroes in on one. It focuses. It pulls that one thing into the foreground and lets everything else recede. This is not neutral. Attention is an activity. It shapes what you experience by choosing what to highlight. If your attention homes in on the noise outside, that becomes your world. If it rests on the feeling of the blanket against your skin, that becomes your world instead. Same moment, different experience, depending entirely on where attention lands. And then comes intention. Based on what attention has selected and how it feels, your mind generates a response. I want more of this. I want less of that. I need to fix this. I need to escape that. These little impulses arise so quickly that we almost never notice them as separate events. They just feel like what is happening, but they are not what is happening. They are what we are doing with what is happening. And that distinction matters enormously. The Buddha used a simple image for this. He compared the mind to a small animal, a squirrel or a mouse, that grabs something pleasant and scurries back to its hiding place to enjoy it in private. It sits there nibbling, and when the pleasant thing runs out, it peeks out nervously, looking for the next thing to grab. Then it scurries back again. If you watch your own mind honestly, you will probably recognize this pattern. Something good happens, and you pull it close. You replay it. You savor it. You hold on to it. You want to be alone with it for a while. Just you and this pleasant thing, undisturbed. Then it fades, as all things fade, and there is a small anxiety, a restless scanning feeling, a peeking out for the next thing. What else is there? What can I grab next? And then you find something, a plan, a memory, a fantasy, a snack, and you pull it close and scurry back again. When something unpleasant happens, the opposite version runs. You push it away, try to escape it, look for something to distract you from it. The mind scurries just as fast from what it does not want as toward what it does. This is not a character flaw. It is how the unexamined mind works. It is the horse running. The Buddha was not criticizing anyone for doing it. He was saying that once you see it, you have a choice you did not have before. Every time you grab for a pleasant experience and pull it close, something happens to your sense of the world. It contracts. The wide open feeling of just being here narrows down to me, having this thing. Your world becomes you and the thing you are holding. Everything else shrinks into the background. And every time you push away from something unpleasant, the same contraction happens in reverse. You become me, trying to escape this thing. The world narrows to you and your problem. You can feel this physically if you pay attention. When you are wanting something badly, there is a tightness in the chest, a leaning forward, a narrowing of focus. When you are trying to avoid something, there is a pulling back, a bracing, a closing off. Both of these are forms of contraction. Both of them make the world smaller. The Buddha noticed that this contraction is what it actually feels like to become something. Every time you grab or push, you become a someone with a something. A someone who is enjoying. A someone who is suffering. A someone who is bored and scanning for relief. And each of these someones lives in a very small world. When the contraction relaxes, when you stop grabbing and stop pushing, the world opens up again. You may have noticed this yourself. There are moments, usually brief, when you are not trying to get anything or get away from anything. Maybe you are sitting outside and the evening is warm and you are not planning or remembering, just here. In those moments, everything feels larger, easier, more spacious. You did not add anything to the moment. You just stopped contracting around it. A student once went to his meditation teacher in frustration. "My practice is terrible," the student said. "I cannot focus. My legs ache. My mind wanders everywhere. I fall asleep. It is just terrible." The teacher nodded calmly. "It will pass," he said. The student went away and kept practicing. A week later he came back, glowing. "My practice is wonderful," he said. "I feel so aware, so peaceful. Everything is clear. It is the best it has ever been." The teacher nodded the same calm nod. "It will pass," he said. The teacher gave the same answer to both states, because both states are the same thing, temporary experiences that the mind wants to grab or push away. The terrible practice is something you want to escape. The wonderful practice is something you want to hold on to. But the teacher is pointing past both of them to the awareness that watches them come and go. That awareness is not terrible or wonderful. It is just here, steady, unchanged by whatever passes through it. This is the place the Buddha was always pointing toward. Not the highs, not the lows, but the steady ground underneath both. The place where you can watch the horse run without climbing on its back. The practical teaching here is about intention. Of the three forces the Buddha identified, contact, attention, and intention. Intention is the one you have the most influence over. You cannot stop contact from happening. Sights will arise, sounds will arise, thoughts will arise. And attention is hard to control directly because it has been following its habits for a very long time. But intention can be trained. Slowly, gently, over time. You can learn to notice the moment before you grab, the moment before you push, and choose a different response. The Zen master who told the horse story was making exactly this point. The horse is running because it has always run. The rider has never tried to take the reins. But the reins are there. The moment you notice you are on the horse, the moment you realize you have been carried along by momentum you did not choose, that is the moment the reins appear in your hands. You do not have to yank the horse to a stop. You do not have to fight your own habits. You just have to notice them. The noticing itself changes the relationship. Once you see the pattern, once you feel the grab or the push as it is happening, you are no longer completely inside it. There is a small space between you and the habit, and in that space, something new becomes possible. The Buddha said, "Whatever a person frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of their mind." This means that the habits you have now were built by repetition, and new habits can be built the same way. Every time you notice the horse running and choose not to chase the next thought, the next worry, the next plan, you are training a new inclination. Every time you let a pleasant moment be here without grabbing it, or let an unpleasant moment pass without fighting it, you are loosening the old grooves and laying down new ones. It does not happen overnight, but it happens. The horse learns, over time, that it does not have to run every time a thought crosses the road. And the rider learns, over time, that stillness is not something you have to chase. It is what is already here when the running stops. Rest a moment in the quiet. When it feels natural, we move on. Most of us slip into a kind of carelessness without realizing it. Not malicious, just numb. You toss something off. You shrug something away. You half do a task, half say a kindness, half listen to someone who is talking to you. None of it seems to matter much. It is just another moment in another day, and there will be more of them tomorrow. We do this dozens of times a day. The email we write without thinking. The thank you we say without meaning. The person we walk past without seeing. Each of these moments passes and seems to disappear. But the Buddha taught that they do not disappear. They go somewhere. They become part of something. He said that every conscious intention, no matter how small, leaves a trace. Every thought you think on purpose, every word you choose, every small act of care or carelessness drops into the pond of your experience and sends out ripples. There is no throwaway moment. There is no, it does not count. Everything counts. He put it simply. There is no away. You cannot toss something out of your mind the way you toss something into a bin. Wherever you throw it, it is still in the room. The impatience you express becomes part of the atmosphere you live in. The kindness you offer does too. The moment you choose to really listen and the moment you choose to check out both leave their mark. They do not evaporate. They stay, and they shape what comes next. This teaching is what the Buddha called karma. The word gets used loosely in popular culture, usually to mean something like cosmic payback, as if the universe is keeping score and handing out rewards and punishments. But the Buddha used it to mean something more specific and more useful. Karma simply means action, and specifically intentional action. What you do on purpose, what you say on purpose, what you think on purpose, these shape what happens next. They shape your own mind. They shape the world you end up living in. The mechanism is simple. When you practice impatience, you become a more impatient person. When you practice kindness, you become a kinder person. Every act of attention or inattention trains the mind in a particular direction. Over time, these directions become habits, and the habits become your character, and your character becomes the world you experience. You are always, whether you know it or not, building the house you live in. This can sound heavy if you hear it the wrong way. If you focus only on the mistakes, it is easy to feel crushed by it. Every careless word, every selfish impulse, every moment of neglect, they are all still with you, still part of the pattern, still influencing how you see the world and how the world feels to you. That is a hard thing to sit with. But the Buddha did not teach karma as a way to make people feel guilty. He taught it as a way to wake people up to their own power. Because if every thoughtless act leaves its mark, then every thoughtful act does too. Every moment of genuine kindness, every honest word, every time you choose patience over irritation, that also stays. That also ripples outward. That also becomes part of the world you live in. No good deed is wasted. No kind thought disappears. No moment of real attention is thrown away. This is the other side of karma, and it is the side the Buddha wanted people to feel most deeply. He said that even the smallest gesture of goodness, if it comes from a sincere heart, is worth more than the grandest gesture done out of habit or display. In an ancient city, during the time of the Buddha, a poor woman lived on the edges of the marketplace. She owned nothing but the clothes on her back. She survived by begging for food and spare coins. She slept wherever she could find shelter, in doorways, under trees, on the edges of the marketplace after the stalls had closed. One day, she heard that a great festival of light was being held in the Buddha's honor. People from all over the city were bringing oil lamps as offerings. She watched as the wealthy citizens arrived with magnificent lamps, huge vessels of fine oil, carried on carts by their servants. The lamps were beautiful, polished brass and copper, and the oil was fragrant and expensive. Hundreds of lamps were arranged in long rows, and the whole scene glowed with warmth and color. She wanted to make an offering too. She reached into the folds of her clothes and found a single small coin. It was everything she had. It was her meal for the day. With it, she could buy a tiny amount of the cheapest oil, barely enough to keep a small clay lamp burning for a few hours. She knew it would look like nothing next to the splendid lamps of the wealthy. She bought the oil anyway, and she went hungry that evening. She carried her small lamp to the place where the other offerings were arranged. She set it among them, small and plain, surrounded by magnificence. She knelt and made a quiet wish. May this light, small as it is, help someone find their way. That night, as the hours passed, the expensive lamps began to go out one by one. The fine oil burned through. The wicks sputtered and died. By morning, one of the Buddha's senior disciples was making his rounds, extinguishing the lamps that were still burning so they could be cleaned and returned to their owners. He came to the poor woman's lamp, still burning steadily, and tried to blow it out. It would not go out. He tried again, harder. It burned on. He cupped his hand over it. It burned on. He pressed his robes against it. Still it burned, as steady as if it had just been lit. The Buddha, who had been watching from across the courtyard, walked over. "You will not be able to put out that lamp," he said quietly. It was lit with a whole heart. The size of the offering does not matter. What matters is the intention behind it. That lamp burns with something that wind cannot touch. The story is about the relationship between the size of an act and the sincerity behind it. The wealthy donors gave a great deal, but their giving was mixed with display, with habit, with the comfortable feeling of generosity that costs nothing. The poor woman gave almost nothing, but she gave everything she had, and she gave it with her whole attention. The lamp she lit carried the full weight of her intention, and that is what made it endure. The Buddha taught that intention is the seed of everything. It is more important than the outcome. It is more important than the size of the gesture. A small act done with complete sincerity reaches further than a grand act done out of habit or obligation. This is why no good thought is wasted and no kind word disappears. It is not the scale that matters. It is the quality of heart behind it. There is another story from the Zen tradition about a monk who lived alone in a small hut at the foot of a mountain. He owned almost nothing. A few robes, a bowl, a mat to sleep on. One evening, a thief crept into the hut while the monk was away. He searched every corner, opened every drawer, looked behind every shelf. There was nothing to take. The hut was bare. The monk came home and found the thief standing in the middle of the room, empty-handed and embarrassed. "You have come a long way," the monk said gently. "I am sorry there is nothing here for you to take. Please, at least accept my clothes as a gift." He took off his outer robe and handed it to the bewildered thief. The man took the robe and hurried away into the night. The monk sat down in the doorway of his empty hut, wearing only his undergarment. The night was clear. The moon was full and bright over the mountain. "Poor fellow," the monk said quietly, looking up. "I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." The monk had nothing, and yet he experienced himself as having something to give. The thief, who had come to take, left with a robe and a memory of unexpected kindness. But the monk's intention went even further than the robe. He wanted to give the man the moon. He wanted to give him everything beautiful. He could not do it literally, but the intention itself was real and complete, and generous beyond anything the situation required. This is what the Buddha was teaching about intention. It does not need to produce a visible result to be real. The monk could not hand someone the moonlight, but the wish to do so was itself an act of goodness, and according to the Buddha's teaching, that wish did not disappear. It became part of the monk's world. It became part of who he was. This teaching changes the way you look at ordinary life. If every intention matters, then no moment is dead. The morning you feel too tired to be kind, but you are kind anyway, that counts. The conversation where you could check out, but you choose to really listen, that counts. The irritation you feel towards someone, but you soften it instead of acting on it, that counts too. None of it is heroic. None of it will make the news. But all of it is shaping the world you live in, one small intention at a time. The Buddha said, "Intention is what I call action." Through intention, one acts by body, speech, or mind. This means that the real action is not in the doing. It is in the choosing. The moment you choose to be patient, the moment you choose to be honest, the moment you choose to pay attention when it would be easier not to, that is where the action lives. Everything else is just the echo. And this is what brings a person out of the numbness we talked about at the beginning. That feeling of, it does not matter, just get through the day, is itself a kind of death. It is a withdrawal from participation. The teaching of karma, understood properly, is an invitation to come back to life. Not through some grand gesture, but through the quality of intention you bring to whatever is in front of you right now. There is a related teaching in Buddhism about what is sometimes called right view. Right view is the first step on the Buddha's Eightfold Path, and at its simplest, it means understanding that actions have consequences, that what you put into life is what you get out of it, that you are not living in a vacuum where things happen randomly and nothing you do matters. This sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but most of us do not actually live this way. We live as though many of our moments are disposable, as though the way we handle the small things, the boring things, the invisible things, does not really count. Right view says it all counts. Every moment is live. Every intention is a seed. And the seeds do not just affect other people. They affect you. The impatience you practice makes you a more impatient person. The kindness you practice makes you a kinder one. You are not just acting on the world. You are building yourself, one intention at a time. The mind you cultivate is the home you live in. And you are always, whether you know it or not, working on the house. The poor woman lit a single lamp with a single coin. It was the smallest offering at the festival, and it was the only one still burning at dawn. The Buddha looked at it and smiled, because he could see what it was made of. It was made of a whole heart, given completely. And a whole heart, even in the smallest gesture, is the most powerful force there is. One soft breath in, one soft breath out. Then, together, onward. We eat without tasting. We have practiced this so often it has become invisible. You sit down, you put food on your plate, and you eat it. While you eat, you are thinking about something else. You are planning the afternoon, replaying a conversation, scrolling through your phone. The food goes in. You chew without noticing you are chewing. You swallow without tasting. The meal is over and you could not tell someone exactly what you ate because you were not really there for it. Your body was at the table. Your mind was somewhere else entirely. This happens with more than food. We do it with conversations, with walks, with whole afternoons. We consume experience the way we consume fast food, quickly and without attention, already thinking about the next thing before the current thing has finished. The Buddha noticed this and thought it was a waste. Not a moral failing, just a waste. Because every meal is an encounter with something real, something that took effort and time and weather and human hands to arrive at your plate. And if you eat it in a blur, you miss the encounter entirely. You consume the food, but you do not meet it. In the monastic tradition the Buddha established, eating was treated as a form of practice. Not in a stiff, formal way, but as an exercise in actually being present with what is in front of you. Each bite was taken consciously. Each mouthful was chewed and noticed. The monks would look at their bowl before eating and pause. They would take their eyes off the food between spoonfuls, just briefly, to break the trance of automatic consumption. The idea was simple. If you can be fully present for a spoonful of rice, you can be fully present for anything. A monk sat down one morning with his bowl. He had been practicing for years, and he was comfortable with the routine. The food arrived. He began eating, and within seconds, he was gone. His body was spooning food into his mouth, but his mind was reviewing the morning chores, planning the afternoon, replaying something someone had said to him the day before. The food was just fuel. It went down in a blur. Then his teacher walked past and stopped. "Do you know what you are eating right now?" he asked. The monk looked down. There was a lettuce leaf on his spoon. He had not noticed it. He had not noticed any of it. "That leaf," said the teacher, "is not just a lettuce leaf. Someone grew it. Someone picked it. Someone carried it here. Someone offered it so that you could eat and continue to practice. It worked hard to reach you, and you are swallowing it without even looking at it." The monk looked at the leaf, really looked at it. For the first time in a long time, he saw what was on his spoon. A single leaf, green and specific and real, with its own texture, its own ridges, its own particular shade of green. He chewed it slowly. He tasted it. He felt the coolness of it in his mouth. "There," said the teacher. "Now you are eating." What the teacher was pointing at was not table manners. He was pointing at the difference between consuming something and meeting it. We consume things all day long. Food, conversations, experiences, people. They pass through us and we pass through them, and neither side is changed much by the encounter because nobody was fully present for it. Meeting something is different. When you actually meet what is in front of you, when you bring your full attention to this specific thing, right here, right now, something changes. The thing stops being generic and becomes itself. The lettuce leaf is no longer some food. It is this leaf, with this color, this texture, this taste. And you are no longer a person eating on autopilot. You are someone who is here, in contact, alive to what is happening. The Buddhist tradition calls this kind of contact reverence. Reverence is different from wanting. When you want something, you are trying to get something from it. When you are reverent towards something, you are simply recognizing what it is. You are paying attention to its reality instead of your agenda. You are saying, with your attention, this is here, and so are you, and for this moment, nothing else is needed. In the Zen tradition, a lay practitioner who lived in China over 1,000 years ago. He was not a monk. He had a family and a household, and ordinary work to do. When people asked him what his spiritual practice was, he said something that has been remembered ever since. "My daily activities are nothing unusual. I am simply in harmony with them, grasping nothing, discarding nothing. Everywhere, no obstacle, no conflict. My miracle is drawing water and chopping wood." This is one of the most famous lines in all of Zen, and it is easy to misunderstand. It sounds like he is saying, "I do not have a practice, I just do chores." But that is the opposite of what he meant. He was saying that the chores were his practice. The drawing of water, the chopping of wood, the sweeping of the floor, these were not things he had to get through in order to do something spiritual. They were the spiritual thing, done with full attention and no resistance. The difference between a chore and a practice is not what you are doing. It is how you are doing it. If you sweep the floor while wishing you were meditating, the sweeping is a chore. If you sweep the floor while actually sweeping the floor, aware of the broom in your hands and the dust moving and the sound of bristles on stone, the sweeping becomes something else entirely. It becomes alive. The Zen tradition records an exchange between a teacher and a young monk who had just arrived at a monastery. The monk approached the teacher and said, "I have just entered the monastery. Please teach me." The teacher looked at him. "Have you eaten your rice porridge this morning?" "Yes," the monk said. "I have eaten." "Then go and wash your bowl." That was the teaching, the whole thing. Go and wash your bowl. The monk, according to the tradition, understood immediately. What was there to understand? The monk came looking for something special, something beyond the ordinary. The teacher sent him back to what was right in front of him. You have eaten. Now wash the bowl. Do not skip over the thing that is here in search of the thing you imagine must be somewhere else. The next step is always the one in front of you, and it is always ordinary, and if you do it with your full presence, it is enough. This is the thread that runs through all of tonight's teaching. We consume life in a blur, always reaching past what is here toward what might be better. The lettuce leaf on the spoon, the bowl that needs washing, the walk to the door, the sound of the rain. All of these are invitations to stop reaching and start arriving. And every time we accept the invitation, even for a moment, something shifts. The blur clears. The world becomes specific and close. And we find, again, that what we were looking for was never somewhere else. The Buddha talked about this in terms of blessing. He said that we tend to relate to things in one of two ways. Either we want them and we grab for them, or we do not want them and we push them away. Wanting and rejecting, grabbing and pushing, these are the only two modes most of us use. Our whole relationship with the world swings between these two poles. I like this, give me more. I do not like this, take it away. But there is a third way, and the Buddha called it rapport. Rapport is what happens when you stop trying to get something from an experience and stop trying to avoid it, and instead, you just meet it. You are with it. You are in contact with it, openly, without an agenda. You are neither consuming it nor rejecting it. You are simply present to it. This is what blessing feels like from the inside. When you bless something, you are not evaluating it. You are not asking what it can do for you. You are not comparing it to what you wish you had instead. You are just acknowledging it fully as it is. You can bless a meal by actually tasting it. You can bless a conversation by actually listening, not waiting for your turn, not planning what you will say, just hearing the other person. You can bless your own body by noticing it, right now, without judgment, without wishing it were different, just feeling it here, holding you up, breathing for you, doing its quiet work moment after moment without being asked. The monk who looked at the lettuce leaf was blessing it, not with a prayer or a ritual, but with his attention. He saw it. That was enough. Everything that reaches you has traveled a long way to get here. The food on your plate was grown in soil that someone tended. It was watered by rain that fell from clouds that gathered over oceans hundreds of miles away. It was picked by someone's hands, maybe early in the morning, maybe in heat, maybe in cold. It was sorted, packed, loaded, driven, unloaded, stocked, purchased, carried home, washed, prepared, and placed before you. By the time it reaches your mouth, it carries the effort of more people and more processes than you could ever trace. The same is true of the clothes you are wearing. The same is true of the bed you are lying on. The same is true of the air in the room, of the walls around you, of the voice coming through whatever device you are listening on. Everything here arrived through a chain of events that stretches back further than you can see. And the same is true of the people in your life. Each person who is close to you arrived through their own long chain of experiences, their own history of being shaped by the world, their own struggle to figure out how to live. When you meet them with carelessness, you miss all of that. When you meet them with attention, you begin to sense the depth of what is actually in front of you. The practice the Buddha pointed toward is simply to stop sleepwalking through these encounters, to slow down enough, even briefly, to notice what has arrived, to let your attention rest on one thing, this breath, this sound, this person, this leaf, and to see it clearly for a moment. This is not a grand practice. It is not difficult. It is just a willingness to be here for what is here, instead of somewhere else for something else. And the strange thing, the thing that makes this teaching so quietly powerful, is that when you do this, when you actually meet what is in front of you, you do not just give attention to it. You receive something back. The meal feeds you differently when you taste it. The conversation reaches you differently when you listen. The evening feels different when you are in it instead of planning tomorrow. Blessing goes both directions. When you give your presence to something, it gives its presence to you. Allow a little silence now, a slow breath in and a slow breath out. One of the most surprising things in the Buddha's teaching is how much of the path has to do with other people. We tend to think of spiritual practice as a private affair, something between you and your own mind. And in one sense, it is. But the Buddha placed enormous importance on how we live with each other, because he saw that the way we treat other people is not separate from the way we train our minds. It is the same activity. When you are dismissive towards someone, it does not just affect them. It trains your own perception. The next time you see that person, you see them through the lens of your dismissal. They become smaller in your eyes, less real, less worthy of your attention. Over time, through repetition, this becomes a habit. And the habit becomes the world you live in, a world full of people who do not quite matter, a world that feels thin and distant and strangely lonely, even when you are surrounded by others. The same thing works in the other direction. When you treat someone with genuine care, when you actually see them, your perception of them changes. They become more vivid, more present, more real, and your world becomes a warmer place, not because the world changed, but because your way of meeting it did. The Buddha said this very directly. The people you find difficult are not really out there. They arise in your consciousness. Your experience of them is shaped by your intention toward them. If your intention is to push them away, you will experience them as people worth pushing away. If your intention shifts, even slightly, toward care, the experience shifts with it. There is a story about a small monastery in a forest that had fallen on hard times. Once it had been a thriving place, full of life and purpose. But over the years the monks had grown old and weary. The buildings needed repair. No young people came to join them. The handful of monks who remained moved through their days in a kind of quiet discouragement, each one privately wondering when the end would come. The abbot of the monastery was troubled. He had watched the life drain out of the place year by year. The monks barely spoke to each other anymore. Meals were eaten in a tired silence. The garden was overgrown. The chanting had become flat and routine, something to get through rather than something to feel. He decided to seek advice from a sage who lived alone in a hut deeper in the forest. This sage was old and had a reputation for unusual wisdom, though he rarely spoke and never sought visitors. The abbot walked the forest path to the hut and found the sage sitting outside, watching the light move through the trees. "We are dying," the abbot said. "Our monastery has no life left in it. No one comes. We cannot seem to find our way back to what we once had. Is there anything you can tell us?" The sage sat quietly for a long time. The abbot waited. Finally, the sage said, "The only thing I can tell you is this: the awakened one is among you." The abbot did not understand, but the sage had nothing more to say. So the abbot walked back to the monastery and told the others what the sage had said. They were bewildered. "The awakened one is among us?" What could that mean? They looked at each other, the same faces they had seen every day for years, and tried to imagine which one the sage could have meant. Is it the abbot himself? He has led us for so long, and he carries a quiet gravity that the rest of us lean on. Or perhaps it is the old one who tends the garden, who never complains and never asks for anything. He has a gentleness that is hard to explain. Surely it is not the argumentative one, the one who picks fights over small matters. But then, that one has a surprising sharpness when it comes to the teachings, a clarity that occasionally takes everyone by surprise. And what if the sage meant something even stranger? What if he meant that it could be any of them? What if he meant it might even be the one who least suspects it? They could not settle the question, but something began to shift in how they treated each other. On the chance that one of them might be the awakened one, they started to offer a little more care, a little more patience, a little more attention. They listened more closely when someone spoke at meals. They noticed each other's efforts in ways they had stopped noticing long ago. They looked at each other with slightly different eyes, not because they had resolved the question, but because the question itself had changed the atmosphere. Over time, something happened that none of them had planned. The warmth they were offering each other began to show. Visitors to the monastery, people who came to walk the forest paths or sit in the old meditation hall, started to linger. They could feel something in the place, a quality of attention, of mutual respect, that was hard to name but easy to sense. Young people began to come, at first out of curiosity, then out of genuine interest. A few asked if they could stay. Within a few years, the monastery was alive again. Not because of any grand program or new teaching, but because a handful of tired monks had started treating each other as though each one mattered. The sage's words did not contain information. He did not tell them anything factual. What he gave them was a shift in perception. By suggesting that the awakened one might be among them, he gave them a reason to look at each other differently. And the looking differently was itself the practice. This is the heart of the Buddha's teaching about community. How you see the people around you is not a side issue. It is the main issue. If you walk through your day seeing people as obstacles, as annoyances, as creatures of your own frustration, that is the world you build around yourself. If you walk through your day seeing them as beings who, like you, are trying to figure out how to live, something opens up. The world becomes a place where connection is possible. A man once moved to a new village. Before settling in, he went to the local teacher and asked, "What are the people like here? Are they kind?" The teacher asked, "What were the people like in the village you came from?" "Terrible," the man said. "Selfish, dishonest, cold. That is why I left." "You will find the people here are much the same," the teacher said. Sometime later, another newcomer arrived and asked the same question. "What are the people like in this village?" Again, the teacher asked. "What were they like where you came from?" "Wonderful," the woman said. "Generous, warm, honest. It was hard to leave them." "You will find the people here are much the same," the teacher said. The teacher gave opposite answers to the same question, and both answers were true, because the question was never really about the village. It was about the person asking. The man who saw selfishness everywhere would see it here too, because that is the lens he carried with him. The woman who saw kindness would find it here, because she was already looking for it. The Buddha saw this as one of the most important dynamics in human life. The way you regard people trains your perception of them. If you treat someone with suspicion, you begin to see suspicious behavior everywhere, even where it does not exist. If you treat someone with warmth, you begin to notice the warmth in them, even when it is hidden under layers of difficulty. You are not just responding to people. You are actively shaping the version of them that you experience. This is why the Buddha placed such emphasis on intention in relationships. He did not ask his followers to like everyone. He asked them to take their treatment of others seriously, because he knew that what you practice outwardly trains what you experience inwardly. Every moment of dismissal strengthens the habit of dismissal. Every moment of care strengthens the habit of care. You are always in training, whether you know it or not. The question is what you are training yourself to see. The Buddha put this simply: hatred is never ended by hatred. It is ended by love. This is an ancient and eternal law. The word he used was not quite love in the way we usually mean it. It was closer to goodwill, a steady, intentional friendliness that does not depend on whether the other person is likable or easy or pleasant to be around. It is a choice to regard others with warmth, even when warmth is difficult. And the Buddha taught it not as a moral obligation but as a practical skill. Because the alternative, regarding others with irritation and distance, creates a world you do not want to live in. This does not mean putting up with bad behavior or pretending everything is fine when it is not. Goodwill is not passivity. It is a quality of attention. You can set a boundary with someone and still regard them with goodwill. You can disagree with someone completely and still see them as a human being who is struggling, just as you are struggling. The goodwill is not about approving of what they do. It is about refusing to reduce them to less than they are. The monks in the story did not become enlightened. They did not suddenly love each other without reservation. They just started paying a little more attention. They started treating each other as if each person mattered. And that small shift, repeated day after day, changed everything. The warmth they practiced became the warmth they felt. The care they offered came back to them not as a reward, but as a natural consequence of the kind of world they were building together. The monastery came alive not because of any grand transformation, but because a handful of tired old monks decided to look at each other with slightly kinder eyes. This is available to anyone. It does not require a monastery or a sage in the forest. It requires only the willingness to notice how you are regarding the person in front of you right now, and to soften that regard, even slightly, in the direction of care. The people around you will feel the difference, even if nothing is said. And you will feel the difference too, because the world you see is always a reflection of the eyes you are seeing it with. Breathe and let the body soften. In a moment, we continue. There is a trap on the spiritual path that the Buddha talked about openly, and it is one of the subtlest things he ever addressed. It is the trap of turning peace itself into something you cling to. Everything we have talked about tonight has been, in one way or another, about letting go. Letting go of irritating thoughts, of the habit of becoming, of the need to be elsewhere, of the patterns that carry us along without our choosing. And all of that is true. Letting go is at the heart of the path. But here is the complication. The very skills you develop to let go can themselves become things you hold on to. The calm you cultivate in meditation can become something you protect and defend. The clarity you gain can become a source of pride, a way of feeling superior to people who have not gained it. The detachment you practice can become its own kind of hiding place, a way of removing yourself from life while looking spiritual doing it. The Buddha was unusually honest about this. He said that even the highest and most refined states of mind, even the deepest meditation, even the most beautiful and peaceful experiences a person can have, these are just the finest forms of clinging. They are still something you are holding. And as long as you are holding something, you are not completely free. This is a strange teaching, because it seems to undermine everything that came before. If the practices lead to beautiful states, and the beautiful states are also a form of clinging, what is the point? The point is that the path uses grasping to refine grasping. You grasp at skillful things, wholesome things, calming things, and through that grasping, the mechanism of grasping itself is gradually understood and eventually outgrown. You learn to hold well before you learn to let go entirely. But the letting go is always the direction you are heading. The Buddha once told a parable about a traveler who came to the edge of a wide, dangerous river. On the near bank, the ground was unstable, the area was perilous, and there was no safety to be found. On the far bank, there was solid ground, safety, open land. But there was no bridge and no boat. So the traveler gathered what he could find: branches, vines, fallen logs, broad leaves to fill the gaps. Working through the day, he tied them together and built a rough raft, just sturdy enough to float. It was not elegant. It was not comfortable, but it held together. He lay on it and paddled with his hands and feet, fighting the current, and after a long and difficult crossing, he made it to the far shore. He pulled himself out of the water, exhausted but safe. He stood on solid ground, the danger behind him. He looked back at the raft that had carried him across and thought, "This raft saved my life. It was the most useful thing I have ever had. I would be foolish to leave it behind." And so he lifted the raft out of the water, hoisted it onto his back, and began walking inland, carrying it with him wherever he went. The Buddha paused and asked his listeners, would that be wise? to carry the raft on his back across dry land, simply because it had been helpful on the water. The listeners said no. He should leave the raft on the shore, or push it back into the river for someone else to use, and walk on without it. In the same way, the Buddha said, I have taught the Dharma as a raft, for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of holding on to. This is one of the most remarkable things the Buddha ever said. He compared his own teaching to a tool that is meant to be used and then set down. The practices, the techniques, the beautiful states of mind that arise through meditation, the calm, the clarity, the insight, none of these are the destination. They are the raft. They carry you across. And when you have crossed, you honor them by setting them down, not by strapping them to your back. This is hard for people to hear, especially people who have worked hard on their practice. By the time you have built the raft and used it successfully, you are attached to it. You know how to sit. You know how to breathe. You have found something that works. The meditation has become precious to you, maybe the most precious thing in your life. And now the teaching says, gently but clearly, that even this must be held lightly. The Buddha was not saying the path is useless. The path is essential. You cannot cross without the raft. You must build it with care. You must use it with real dedication. But you must also understand that the raft is not the shore. The tools that bring you to freedom are not freedom itself. Freedom is what remains when you no longer need the tools. There is a particular kind of clinging that shows up in people who have practiced for a long time, and the Buddha described it with care. It is the clinging to detachment itself. A person practices letting go. Over time, they get good at it. They learn to step back from their emotions, to observe their thoughts without getting swept up in them. They develop a kind of cool steadiness that looks, from the outside, like wisdom. But sometimes, underneath that steadiness, there is something else. A pulling away from life. A subtle refusal to be touched by things. A wall that has been built so gradually and so skillfully that it is hard to tell the difference between the wall and genuine peace. The Buddha called this a kind of grasping in disguise. Instead of grasping at pleasant things, the person is grasping at non-grasping. Instead of clinging to experiences, they are clinging to the absence of experience. And this is still clinging. It is just harder to see because it looks so much like the real thing. The difference between genuine freedom and this kind of false detachment is simple. A person who has genuinely let go still feels things. They are still moved by beauty, by kindness, by the sadness of the world. They are not walled off. They are actually more open than before, more available to life, not less. The letting go has made them softer, not harder. A person who is clinging to detachment, on the other hand, has become a little bit numb. They have used the tools of practice to build a wall rather than a bridge. They are protected, but they are not free. And the protection has become so comfortable and so familiar that they have mistaken it for peace. The way through this, according to the Buddha, is not to fight it or force some new breakthrough. It is simply to notice it, the same way you have been noticing everything else along this path. You notice the grip. You notice the holding. You notice that the peace you are protecting has become a possession, something you are afraid of losing, and you let it soften. There is a natural process at work here. and the Buddha trusted it deeply. He compared it to outgrowing something. A child clings to a toy, loves the toy, needs the toy. And then one day, without anyone forcing the issue, the toy no longer satisfies. The child sets it down, not out of discipline or willpower, but because the need has simply passed. The hands open naturally when the holding is no longer necessary. The same thing happens on the spiritual path. At a certain point, the practices that once nourished you stop nourishing you in the same way. The meditation that once felt like coming home starts to feel like a routine. The calm you cultivated starts to feel a little closed, a little defended, a little like a room you have been sitting in for too long. This is not a failure. This is not backsliding. This is a sign of growth. It means you are ready to set the raft down. The far shore is closer than you think. There is a phrase in the Zen tradition, "If you meet the Buddha on the road, let him go." It sounds shocking at first, even disrespectful. But it is pointing at the same teaching as the raft parable. If you have turned the Buddha into a fixed image, a concept, an idea you carry around and measure yourself against, then that image has become one more thing on your back. The living truth cannot be held in a concept, even a beautiful one. It can only be lived, moment by moment, in the actual texture of your experience. The same applies to any idea of yourself as a spiritual person. If you have built an identity around being calm, being wise, being someone who has let go, then that identity is one more raft. And at some point, that raft too must be set down. You do not need to be the person who meditates. You do not need to be the person who has found peace. You just need to be here, without any label at all, and let whatever is happening, happen, without wrapping a story around it. This is perhaps the most challenging point on the entire path, because it asks you to release the very thing that got you here. The dedication, the discipline, the identity as a practitioner, all of it served a purpose, and all of it, eventually, must be held lightly enough to set down. The paradox is that you could not have gotten here without the raft, and you cannot go further while still carrying it. But the setting down is not a loss. It is a graduation. The traveler who leaves the raft on the shore does not regret building it. He is grateful for it. He honors it. And then he walks on, lighter than before, into open country where no raft is needed because there is no more river to cross. This is one of the kindest things about the Buddhist path. It does not ask you to hold on to anything forever. It does not even ask you to hold on to itself. It is a teaching that includes its own release. Use it fully. Give yourself to it completely. And then, when it has done its work, walk on. The shore is solid under your feet. You do not need the raft anymore. Stay with this stillness for a breath. Then we will come to the next part together. There is a moment every morning that the Buddha's tradition takes very seriously. It is the moment between sleep and waking. The moment when you are still warm, still comfortable, still wrapped in the privacy of your own rest, and something calls you out of it. In a monastery, this is the morning bell, rung before dawn, in the cold, when every part of you wants to stay exactly where you are. The bell does not ask how you feel. It does not check whether you are ready. It does not negotiate. It rings, and the day begins, and you either get up or you do not. This small daily event contains in miniature, the entire teaching we have been exploring tonight. The pillow is the retreat. The bell is the world. And the choice to get up, to leave the warmth, to step into the cold and begin again is the choice to be alive. Every morning, the same choice. Every morning, the same opportunity to show up or to hide. In the monastic tradition, this is not treated as a test of willpower. It is treated as a practice in intention. The bell rings, and for a moment, you feel the full weight of not wanting to move. The body is heavy. The mind offers every possible reason to stay in bed. It is too early. It is too cold. Nothing will be different today. What is the point? And in that gap between the bell and the getting up, everything the Buddha taught about intention is right there, immediate and real. You can choose the comfort of retreat, or you can choose to come out into the world of contact and feeling and effort, knowing that the comfort you leave behind is smaller than the aliveness you step into. This is not only a monastic experience. Everyone faces some version of this every day. The alarm goes off. The meeting begins. The conversation you have been avoiding finally comes. The task sits in front of you, and you know you have been putting it off. In each case, there is a moment of choice, usually so brief you do not notice it, where you either show up or check out. You either bring yourself to what is here, or you go through it on autopilot, while the real you hides somewhere in the back. We think of this as a small thing, this moment of choosing. But the Buddha treated it as one of the most important things a person can practice. Because these moments add up. 100 moments of checking out, strung together, become a life lived at a distance. 100 moments of showing up, strung together, become a life that feels real. The Buddha was very clear that this is not a one-time decision. It is not something you resolve once and then it is done. Coming alive is not a permanent achievement. It is a daily practice, and some days it is harder than others. Some mornings the bell rings and you are ready. Some mornings it rings and every part of you wants to pull the blanket over your head and disappear. Both mornings are part of the path. What matters is that the choosing keeps happening. A student once came to his teacher in frustration. "I have a terrible temper," the student said. "It controls me completely. It rises up without warning and takes me over. How can I get rid of it?" The teacher looked at him calmly. "That sounds very unusual," he said. "Show it to me right now." "I cannot show it to you right now," the student said. "It comes up on its own. I cannot summon it." "When does it come?" the teacher asked. "It arises unexpectedly," the student said. "Without warning. Then it cannot be your true nature," the teacher said. "If it were really yours, if it were really who you are, you would be able to produce it at any time. But you cannot. It comes and goes. It arises and passes. Your parents did not give it to you. You were not born with it. Think that over." The teacher is not saying the temper is not real. It is real, and the student feels it strongly. But the teacher is making a precise distinction. There is a difference between something that passes through you and something that is you. The temper arises, stays for a while, and leaves. It is a visitor, not the homeowner. And if you can see it as a visitor, you are no longer completely at its mercy. This applies to the morning resistance just as much as it applies to the temper. The heaviness you feel when the bell rings is real. The desire to stay in bed is real. But it is a visitor. It is not who you are. It arrived without your choosing, and if you wait, even briefly, it will shift. The question is whether you let the visitor run the house or whether you acknowledge it and choose to get up anyway. An old Zen teacher continued to work in the monastery grounds every day, even at the age of 80. He swept the paths each morning. He carried firewood. He pulled weeds in the garden. He did this side by side with monks who were decades younger, and he did it without complaint, without slowing down, without asking to be excused. His students loved him and worried about him in equal measure. They thought he should rest. He had given his entire life to the monastery. Surely he had earned the right to sit quietly and let others do the work. But every time they suggested he take it easy, he ignored them. So one day, while he was sleeping, they hid his tools. They put away his rake, his broom, his gardening knife. They thought that without tools, he would have no choice but to rest. The next morning, the old teacher did not eat breakfast. The monks thought nothing of it. That afternoon, he did not eat lunch. The following day, the same. No work, no food. On the third day, growing concerned, someone asked him why he was not eating. No work, no food, the old teacher said. That was all. His students returned the tools immediately. He went back to work, and he went back to eating. The old teacher was not being difficult. He was expressing something central to the path. For him, showing up to the work was not separate from the practice. It was the practice, the sweeping, the carrying, the daily effort of doing what needed to be done. This was how he stayed alive. This was how he stayed connected to the world, how he kept choosing to be here rather than withdrawing into comfortable stillness. Without the work, the food had no meaning. Without the showing up, the rest of life lost its ground. He would rather go hungry than stop participating. This is the practical application of everything the Buddha taught about intention. Intention is not something you set once and forget. It is something you renew, moment by moment, day by day. Each morning is a fresh start. Each moment of resistance is a fresh opportunity to choose. The Buddha taught that intention is the most important factor in human experience. It is more important than the circumstances you find yourself in. It is more important than the mood you wake up with. Because intention is the one thing you can choose, and it shapes everything that follows. When you set your intention toward aliveness, toward showing up, toward being here with whatever is in front of you, your attention follows. And your attention shapes your experience. If your intention is to retreat, to hide, to get through the day with as little contact as possible, that is the world you will live in. Thin, distant, muffled, like listening to music through a wall. If your intention is to be here, to feel what there is to feel, to meet what there is to meet, the same day becomes a different experience entirely. The raw material of the day has not changed. Your relationship to it has. This does not require heroics. It does not require you to be cheerful or energetic. It just requires the willingness to not check out, to stay present even when present is uncomfortable, to let the bell ring and to get up anyway, not because getting up is pleasant, but because being here is what it means to be alive. The Buddha taught that intention is a seed. What you intend over time is what you become. Every moment of choosing to show up is planting a seed of aliveness. Every moment of choosing to retreat is planting a seed of withdrawal. Over time, the seeds you plant most often are the ones that grow. And the garden you end up living in is the one you have been tending all along, one small choice at a time. There is something else in this teaching that matters. The Buddha did not ask people to be perfect. He did not expect anyone to show up fully, completely, without resistance, every single time. He expected people to struggle. He expected the pull of the pillow, the appeal of retreat, the voice that says, "Not today." What he asked was simpler than perfection. He asked for honesty. Just notice what is happening. Notice the pull. Notice the resistance. Notice the choice, even when you choose retreat. Because even the noticing is a form of showing up. Even the awareness that you are hiding is a step toward coming out. The path is not about getting it right every time. It is about getting a little more honest each time, and a little more willing to choose differently when you can. The morning bell will ring again tomorrow, and the day after that. There will always be another moment when the world asks you to come out of your hiding place and be here. Some days you will come willingly. Some days you will come reluctantly. Some days you will not come at all. And none of that disqualifies you from the path. The path is not reserved for people who always show up. It is for anyone who is willing to try, and to try again, and to keep trying even when it feels like nothing is happening. Something is always happening. The seeds are always being planted. And one day, without any fanfare, you realize that the garden has been growing all along. Let the breath settle. In a moment, we go on. Most spiritual teachings eventually arrive at the question of other people. How to live with them, how to bear them, how to stop being irritated by them. The usual advice is some version of patience or tolerance, and that is fine as far as it goes. But the Buddha went further. He said that other people are not an interruption to the practice. They are the practice. This is not what most people want to hear. Most of us, if we are honest, carry a quiet fantasy of peace that involves fewer people, fewer demands, fewer conversations, fewer personalities to navigate. If only everyone would leave us alone for a while, we think, then we could finally be at ease. The Buddha looked at this fantasy squarely and said it does not work. You can go to a cave in the mountains and sit in perfect silence, and within an hour, your mind will populate the cave with every person you have ever known. They will show up uninvited, the way they always do, because they do not live out there. They live in your consciousness. And they will keep arising in your consciousness whether you are in a crowd or alone on a mountaintop. The question, then, is not how to get away from people. It is how to be with them in a way that does not create suffering for you or for them. The Buddhist scriptures record a time when the Buddha was traveling with his followers and came across a monk who was very ill. The monk had been suffering for days, and his condition was severe. He was lying alone in his quarters, uncared for. No one had come to help him. The Buddha asked the other monks, "Why has no one looked after this man?" They said, "He is difficult. He has never helped any of us. He is not generous with his time or his kindness. So when he fell sick, no one came. The Buddha said nothing to this. He simply went to the sick monk, cleaned him, changed his robes, gave him water, and made him comfortable. When he was finished, he turned to the other monks and said, "If you do not care for one another, who will care for you? Whoever would care for the Buddha should care for the sick." The story is plain. The Buddha did not lecture the monks about compassion. He showed them. He went to the person no one wanted to help, the person who had earned his isolation through his own behavior, and he took care of him. The teaching was in the action. But there is something deeper in this story than simple kindness. The Buddha was showing his followers that service is not a favor you grant to people who deserve it. It is a practice you do for your own sake as much as for theirs. The monk who is left alone in his illness is suffering, but the monks who walk past his door are also suffering in a different way. They are practicing indifference. They are training themselves to look away, and every time they look away, the habit of looking away gets stronger, and their world gets a little smaller, a little colder, a little more defended. The Buddha was interrupting that pattern. He was saying, "You think this man is not your problem, but how you treat him is shaping the kind of person you are becoming. Every act of dismissal narrows your world. Every act of care widens it. The sick monk needs help, but you need to give it." The Zen tradition captures this idea in a single exchange. A student asked the teacher, "What can practice teach about serving others?" The teacher said, "What? Others? Serve yourself." The student, confused, asked, "Then how do you serve yourself?" The teacher said, "Take care of others." This sounds like a riddle, but it is describing something real. When you take care of someone else, genuinely, with real attention, something happens inside you. The wall between self and other thins. The habit of separation softens. You discover that caring for another person does not drain you. It fills you in a way that no amount of self-protection ever does. This is one of the things the Buddha understood most clearly. We think we protect ourselves by withdrawing, by keeping people at a distance, by giving as little as possible. But withdrawal is not protection. It is a slow starvation. The less you give, the less alive you feel. The more you hold back, the smaller your world becomes. And the smaller your world becomes, the more you need to protect, and the tighter the spiral gets. The way out of that spiral is simple, though not always easy. You start giving a little more attention, a little more patience, a little more willingness to see the person in front of you as someone who, like you, is doing their best with what they have. You do not have to like everyone. You do not have to agree with everyone. You just have to stop treating them as furniture. Buddhist teachers have made a sharp observation about what happens in communities when people stop seeing each other clearly. When you live or work closely with the same people day after day, it is easy to reduce them to a handful of traits. He is the grumpy one. She is the one who talks too much. He is the one who never helps. Once you have filed someone into a category, you stop actually seeing them. You see your idea of them instead. And your idea is always smaller than they are. The Buddha said that this is one of the most common forms of suffering in daily life. You keep seeing people as creatures of your own frustration or desire, and then you wonder why your relationships feel thin and unsatisfying. But the thinness is not in the other person. It is in your perception of them. It is in the habit of reducing a living, complex, struggling human being to a label. The remedy is not to force yourself to feel warmth you do not feel. It is to stop and actually look, to notice the person in front of you with fresh eyes, even for a moment, to see the things about them you have stopped seeing because you decided long ago that you already knew who they were. Everyone carries something hidden. The quiet person who seems to have nothing to offer may carry a depth of feeling that rarely finds expression. The difficult person who irritates everyone may be carrying a burden no one has asked about. The person you have written off as boring may light up completely when they talk about the one thing that matters to them. Everyone is more than the label you have given them. And the moment you start to see that, the world becomes a more interesting and more generous place. A teacher once lived in a small monastery with a handful of students. One of the students was struggling. He found community life suffocating. He could not stand the noise, the small talk, the constant proximity of people he had not chosen to live with. He went to the teacher and said he wanted to leave, to practice on his own, somewhere quiet and remote. The teacher listened and then asked, "When you sit alone in your room, what happens?" The student admitted that even alone, his mind was full of other people. He replayed arguments. He rehearsed grievances. He imagined conversations that had not happened yet. The people he wanted to escape were already inside his head, and they did not leave just because he closed the door. "That is the problem," the teacher said. "You think the difficulty is out there, but you are carrying it with you. Wherever you go, these people will come with you because they live in your mind, not in the hallway. The practice is not to escape them. The practice is to change how you hold them." The student stayed, not because staying was comfortable, but because he understood that leaving would not solve the problem. The problem was not the other monks. The problem was how he was relating to them in his own mind. And that relationship could only be worked on where the other people actually were. The Buddha put this in practical terms. He said that we can help, we can serve, we can look after, we can attend to each other with care. These are not extra credit activities for advanced practitioners. They are the core of the path, because every act of care is an act of coming out of the small, defended self and into the larger world. And the larger world, for all its messiness, is where aliveness lives. The Buddha also understood that community is where you learn things about yourself that you would never discover alone. Alone, you can construct any version of yourself you like. You can believe you are patient, generous, easygoing. You can sit in a quiet room and feel like the calmest person in the world. It is only when another person frustrates you, ignores you, demands something from you, or simply does things differently from how you would do them, that you find out what you are really made of. Other people are the mirror, and the mirror does not always show you what you want to see, but it shows you what is true, and truth, even uncomfortable truth, is the ground the path is built on. There is an old Buddhist teaching that says, if you want to know what your life was like in the past, look at your present condition. If you want to know what your future will be, look at your present actions. This applies to relationships as much as anything else. The quality of your connections with people right now is not an accident. It is the result of thousands of small choices about how much attention to give, how much care to offer, how much of yourself to bring to each encounter. And the quality of your future connections depends on the choices you make today. You do not need to transform all your relationships overnight. You do not need to become a saint. You just need to bring a little more presence to the next conversation, a little more willingness to see the person in front of you as they actually are, rather than as you have decided they are. One honest moment of contact changes the pattern. One moment of real seeing, after months of not seeing, can open a door you thought was closed. The Buddha spent 45 years teaching, and in all those years, he never taught alone. He was always with people, always in community, always in the middle of the noise and the difficulty and the friction of human beings trying to live together. He could have stayed by the river after his awakening, savoring the peace, alone with the trees and the water. Instead, he got up, walked to the deer park, and sat down with 5 men who did not want to listen to him. He chose the mess. He chose the difficulty. He chose the people, because the people were never separate from the path. They were the path. You are building the world you live in, one interaction at a time. The people around you are not the scenery. They are the practice. Breathe once, softly, and when it feels right, we continue. We have come a long way tonight, and all of it, every story and every teaching, has been pointing towards something that the Buddha described at the very end of his teaching, something that sounds at first like bad news, but turns out to be the best news of all. He called it cessation. The word sounds like an ending. It sounds like things stopping, going dark, going quiet, in a way that might feel like loss. When people first hear about cessation, they often picture a kind of blankness, a life with the color drained out of it. They imagine sitting in a corner with no feelings, no desires, no engagement with anything. They imagine the candle being blown out and nothing left. The Buddha said that is not what cessation means. What ceases is not life. What ceases is the churning, the endless building up and falling apart, the grasping and pushing, the swinging between wanting and rejecting, the exhausting process of becoming something and then losing it and then becoming something else. All of that can stop. And when it stops, what remains is not blankness. What remains is life itself, fully met, without the interference. After the Buddha's awakening, the old texts describe a period that is easy to overlook. For 7 weeks, he did not teach. He did not travel. He did not seek out students or begin his mission. He simply stayed where he was, near the river, under the trees, and he enjoyed what he had found. The texts describe him walking slowly along the riverbank in the mornings, feeling the ground under his feet, noticing the texture of the earth, the dampness near the water's edge. They describe him standing for long stretches in the shade of a large tree, not waiting for anything, not preparing for anything, just standing and feeling the air move against his skin. They describe him sitting quietly through the long afternoons, watching the light shift across the river, watching the shadows of the branches move across the ground. He was not meditating in any formal way. He was just sitting, just being here. He ate when food came. He drank from the river. He watched the birds settle on the far bank and lift off again. He noticed the way the water caught the light at different times of day, gold in the morning, silver at noon, deep blue in the evening. He was in no hurry. He had nowhere to go and nothing to accomplish. For the first time in 6 years of searching, the searching had stopped, and what was left was not emptiness, but a quiet, vast, unhurried aliveness. He was savoring. That is the word the tradition uses. He was savoring the peace of a mind that had stopped reaching. And the peace was not thin or empty. It was full. It was warm. It was deeply, quietly alive. He was not absent from the world. He was more present to it than he had ever been. The trees were still trees. The river was still a river. The heat of the day was still the heat of the day. The sound of the water was still the sound of the water. Nothing had disappeared. Nothing needed to be different from what it was. And for the first time, he was not asking it to be different. He was just here with what was here, and that was enough. This is what cessation actually looks like. It is not withdrawal from life. It is the end of the war with life. And when the war ends, what you discover is that life was never the enemy. It was the war itself that was exhausting you. There is an image that appears in many Buddhist teachings about a pond. When you stir a pond with a stick, the water becomes cloudy. Mud rises from the bottom. You cannot see through it. The water looks dirty and opaque, and you might think there is something wrong with the pond. But if you take the stick out of the water and wait, the mud settles. Slowly, grain by grain, the water clears. And what you find is that the water was clear the whole time. The muddiness was not a quality of the water. It was the result of the stirring. Stop stirring, and the clarity returns on its own. The Buddha used this image to describe the mind. We stir our own minds constantly, with grasping, with resisting, with planning, with worrying, with the endless activity of trying to make things different from what they are. And then we look at the result and think, there is something wrong with my mind. It is cloudy. It is confused. It is restless, but the cloudiness is not a permanent condition. It is the result of the stirring. The mind, like the water, is naturally clear. We just have to stop disturbing it. This does not mean the mind becomes empty or inactive. The Buddha's mind, in those 7 weeks after his awakening, was not blank. He was thinking, feeling, perceiving, noticing. All the ordinary activities of consciousness continued, but they continued without the churning, without the grasping, without the desperate effort to control and hold and become. They were happening in clear water rather than muddy water. And in clear water, everything is visible, everything is vivid, everything is alive. This is worth understanding clearly because it overturns the most common fear people have about the Buddhist path. The fear is that letting go means losing something. That if you stop wanting, you stop feeling. That if you stop grasping, the world goes flat. The Buddha's experience was the exact opposite. When the grasping stopped, the world became more vivid, not less. Colors did not fade. They brightened. Sounds did not go muffled. They became clear. The people around him did not become distant. They became more present, more real, more fully themselves. The letting go did not take anything away from the world. It took away the layer of interference that had been standing between the Buddha and the world his entire life. The tradition has a phrase for this state, the deathless. We encountered this word at the very beginning of tonight's journey, when the Buddha sat in the deer park at dusk and told 5 skeptical monks, "The deathless has been found." Now, at the end of the journey, we can understand a little better what that word points to. The deathless is not a place or a reward. It is what is left when the cycle of psychological birth and death finally quiets down. All evening we have been looking at that cycle, the building up, the falling apart, the becoming and the losing, the small births and small deaths that happen dozens of times a day. The deathless is what is here when that cycle pauses. It is the space between one becoming and the next. It is the gap that opens when you stop reaching and just allow yourself to be where you are. You have probably tasted it already, in the small ways we talked about in the first module. The moment after letting go of an irritating thought. The cup of tea taken just as it is. The evening when you are not planning or remembering. Just here. These are not lesser versions of what the Buddha found. They are the same thing, in smaller doses. The taste is the same. The quality of ease is the same. The only difference is duration, and duration grows naturally the more you practice. The Buddha said, "The realm of cessation is the realm of life, rather than birth and death. This is the line that ties everything together." Cessation does not mean things stop happening. It means the frantic, exhausting, grasping quality of experience gives way to something steadier and more alive. The river still flows. The birds still sing. People still come and go. Food still needs to be eaten and work still needs to be done. But the relationship to all of it has changed. You are no longer trying to hold the river in your hands. You are sitting by the bank, watching it pass, and the watching is enough. This is what peace actually is. It is not a state of having everything you want. It is not a state of feeling nothing. It is the state of being fully here, without resistance, without the need for things to be different from what they are. It is life, met cleanly, without the extra layer of struggle that we usually bring to it. And the thing the Buddha wanted everyone to understand is that this is not reserved for monks or saints or people who have practiced for decades. It is available right now. It is available in any moment where you stop reaching and start resting in what is here. The practice is not to become someone special. The practice is to stop trying to become anything at all and to discover that what remains when the trying stops is more than enough. Tonight, over the course of these teachings and stories, one thing has been said in many different ways. Peace is not somewhere else. It is not something you earn or build or find at the end of a long search. It is what is already here, underneath the reaching, underneath the grasping, underneath the noise. The poor woman's lamp still burns because sincerity cannot be extinguished. The deer still carries the fragrance it was looking for. The jewel is still stitched into the lining of the coat. The ox is still right there, patient, warm, waiting to be noticed. Every moment of letting go, no matter how small, uncovers a little more of this peace. Every act of attention, every gesture of care, every time you choose to be here instead of somewhere else, you are clearing the water. You are letting the mud settle. You are coming home to what was never actually lost. The path is made of these small moments, and it always was. It was never about becoming someone different or arriving somewhere new. It was about discovering who you already are when the noise finally quiets down. The Buddha found this by the river in the weeks after his awakening, and he spent the rest of his life showing others that they could find it too. Not by going where he went, not by doing what he did, but by stopping wherever they were and noticing what was already here. The Buddha sat by the river for 7 weeks, doing nothing, needing nothing, and he was at peace. That peace is not far away. It is as close as the next breath, the next moment of letting the hands open, the next time you choose to be here instead of reaching for somewhere else. It has always been this close. It has always been this simple. The only thing between you and it is the reaching itself, and the reaching can stop whenever you let it. Breathe gently. Let the body rest. And when the time comes, let sleep arrive the way the mud settles in a pond, slowly, naturally, without any effort at all. Tonight we sat with some old teachings and some old stories, and none of them asked anything of you except your attention. Whatever was heard with an open heart is not lost. Nothing is ever lost. The Buddha taught for 45 years, and at the end of all those years, his teaching could still be held in a single hand. Suffering comes from holding on. Peace comes from letting go. Everything else is commentary. You do not need to remember any of this. You do not need to carry it with you the way the traveler carried his raft. If something landed tonight, it landed. It is already part of you, the way the rain is already part of the river the moment it touches the surface. And if nothing in particular stood out, that is fine too. Sometimes the most important moments in a conversation are the ones that arrive days later, out of nowhere, when you least expect them. The path is not somewhere else. It is here, in the ordinary fabric of your days, in the mornings and the meals, and the conversations, and the quiet moments before sleep. Every breath you take without reaching for the next one is a step on the path. Every time you let something be what it is, without wishing it were different, you are doing the work. Rest now in what remains when the reaching quiets. Let the body settle. Let the mind grow still. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.